Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Phil Mike Likes You with your host Phil Mike. In this show I interview people I like about the things they know best, and this episode's a pretty special one. It's going to be a little different because we are on site in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. My guest here, Sam Frenkel, and I were both here for a wedding. So it's going to be a little different. We have a beach view behind. You might not be able to see the beach. That's okay. The content's going to be amazing. But on today's show, I have my good buddy Sam. He is an ER doctor. He works in San Diego. Very good friend of mine. And I got him on because I kind of want to just know what it's like to have the responsibility of being an ER doctor on you and just knowing what that's like. So, Sam, thanks for coming on. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, let's do this.
So I think the first thing I want to know is basically what are the steps to becoming not just a doctor, but an ER doctor between the medical school and maybe how you decide those types of things, and just what do you need any sort of special education for an ER doctor opposed to just sort of your normal general practice doctor and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, so the steps, so after college you have to take in certain prereqs. I think they've changed now since I did it, but it was biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, calculus, I think 2 years of calculus, whatever the college requirements are. Your application for med school requires the MCAT, and then once you're in medical school, the first 2 years are essentially book learning. So that's where you learn anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, pathophysiology, essentially all of the pieces you're going to need to put together in your third year, which is the year you test out different fields of medicine. So it's still medical school. It's adorable. Everybody walks around in these very short white coats. So if you ever walk into the hospital and see people in the waist-length white coat, it's a medical student. Don't trust them with anything.
So they're still training. They're training.
Very, very early in training. But you try out everywhere, did it differently. I went to Georgetown for med school, and they did 8 weeks of internal medicine, 8 weeks of general surgery. You then had 8 weeks split up into 2-week portions, I believe, of specialty surgeries. So orthopedics, head and neck, plastics, neurosurgery, things like that. We had to do 4 weeks of family practice. I'm sure I'm forgetting other things that I did.
Mm-hmm. Is family practice just what exactly is family practice?
That's totally fair. So the two types of doctors that you see on a regular basis for your checkup. It can be an internal medicine doctor who does most of their care or their training in the hospital, but does some outpatient care. So you can either see them and they only see adults. Family practice is someone who's trained really broadly. So they do essentially baby delivery all the way up to end-of-life care. So if you have a doctor that you have been seeing since you were born and they take care of you all the way through life, that's probably a family practice doctor.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you have a broad range of knowledge, obviously every doctor does and stuff, and then you go into different specialties and all that type of stuff. Is there any specific training, just given the nature of an ER department or whatever you call it, room, is there any sort of special training that you get other than I guess you're just doing your rounds and stuff like that, and you're just walking through, and that's you just have to jump in to get training, or you're not like a urologist where you need to study specific parts. You have to it's almost like a combat field or something like that.
It's very different than pretty much every other specialty, but so your third year you're trying out all these different fields. One of the things I tried out was emergency medicine. Your fourth year of med school is you trying that out in different locations. So there are different ways to practice. So for emergency medicine, there are academic centers like Georgetown, Harvard, all the places the big names you've heard of, Cleveland Clinic. The emergency departments there see really rare, weird diseases. It's less it's less people who are uninsured and less of the like what we call bread and butter medicines. Like a person comes in with just abdominal pain and has appendicitis. They're more likely to see really complex cancer patients who are having complications from their chemotherapy, or it tends to be more complicated thought, like high level thought, lower acute intensity. So they have less people who need CPR or need like massive blood transfusions. Less. It certainly happens. So there's that kind of medicine. There's county medicine, which is generally uninsured patients. So people who've had diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure for 40 years, any number of other issues, never got it taken care of. And they tend to go to these hospitals in their local areas. Those are county hospitals, and then there's these community hospitals, which are in, these are all over generalizations, but in the moderately affluent, it's less likely you're going to go there because you don't get your chemo there, you don't get your really rare treatments. So the people who, your everyday person tends to go to those places. So you have to decide to a certain extent what type of practice you want to do, and that decides where you're going to apply.
So I feel like this is sort of like, I don't know if it's like too simple of a question, because I think everyone knows what an ER doctor kind of does. But I don't
think they do. Actually,
yeah.
It's kinda, I get a lot of questions. People ask me if I do surgery, if I do any number of things. And I mean, ER doctors are really, so the training, you do residency, and that's your specialty training. So I did emergency medicine, people do internal, family practice, neurosurgery, or whatever it is. And for emergency, your job really is to become the best person to handle the first hour of every disease. And after that, if they need something, so if you dislocate your shoulder right now, the person who puts that back in is me, not the orthopedist. If you break something, I usually will realign it and splint you. The person, if you end up needing surgery to put the bone, to keep the bone in place, so you put a plate on there, they need to do something like that, that's the orthopedist. So the first hour of that, like you having the broken bone and needing to get it back into place, is me. The next 10 years of care on that and your rehab and all that, you generally through your orthopedist, things like that. So yeah, we're really the doctor you never want to see, but
right.
Yeah.
Well, it's having like gone to an emergency room, I feel like there's like such a wide range of things that people come in for, and you kind of talked about it, whether it's like someone who has like a bad headache and thinks it's like something, or someone just has a cough, or they don't have insurance and maybe they come in, or it's someone who's bleeding and they need immediate assistance. Like how often do you have like either end of the spectrum where it's just like, okay, this is just another person who's just fine, who just come in, versus someone who's like needing like life-saving care?
It depends on the hospital you work at. So I work at a few different hospitals, and you'll always have some people most people are going to be okay. It isn't like 80% of the people who come into the ER are going to die that minute. Most people come in because they're worried. Like a 50 or 60-year-old with chest pain is a concerning thing. Most of them aren't having heart attacks, but they still need to come and get checked, because one in however many are. And how high risk your patient population is decides whether it's 1 in 5, 1 in 10, 1 in 50. But it's part of being an ER doctor is multitasking. So you'll always have some of the people who you're just checking to see. It doesn't sound like it's a heart attack. We're going to send the blood test, get the EKG, do these tests to make sure, and look for other causes for your chest pain. And at the same time, there's a person who's vomiting blood in bed 3, and there's someone with a bad headache in room 5. So you're essentially going into these rooms, doing your assessment, putting in the orders for the nurse and the tech and whoever else to do the things that you need to do to establish what's going on and how to best care for that person. So if you're vomiting blood, I need to make sure that we have the blood bank ready to get you more blood. I need to put this big IV into, generally we put it right up here, so we can give you as much blood as you're losing so that you don't lose all your blood and die.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're doing all that stuff, I have the nurse who's taking care of bed 5, giving the patient medicine for their headache, or doing the CT scan to look for bleeding or a tumor or any number of things. So that's all of this is happening in parallel. And that's part of the training, is being able to expand how many of those rooms you can be running at the same time.
So it definitely takes a personality to seek this type of like it's like an intense, it's obviously different intensity than maybe other professions within being a doctor. So like, why is there a personality type? Like, why would you want like to be responsible for like so many things at the same time?
I think it's fascinating. Yeah, there are absolutely personality types to different branches of medicine. Orthopedist, everyone kind of describes as like your bro-y jock, the guy who's overly muscly, and they are all really smart and pretend to be really dumb. It's really funny. The neurologists tend to be the like nerdiest of the nerds, and obviously there are exceptions to all these rules. ER doctors tend to be ADD, and they tend to be outdoorsy. So there's all these like joke videos on TikTok and YouTube of ER doctors, like, we all bike into work apparently, and we all wear our bike helmets around the hospital just so we can like go on a run halfway through this shift, which you can never really do, but there's all sorts of jokes about that. But yeah, I fit into the mold for an ER doctor pretty well.
So is there like and like you kind of were talking about it a little before we started recording, where there's maybe like a little bit of confidence in terms of like what your body can endure, whether it's, you know, like a certain type of drug or you know, biking into work or something like that, where like maybe it's not the actual safest thing, but like you feel confident because you actually know the science to it. Like, is there like pros and cons to that, where you feel like, yeah, you know, I know what I'm doing here, or like, yeah, this isn't that dangerous, but you would never recommend someone else to do it, or, you know?
For sure. I mean, I think the easiest example for this is every medical student, as you're going through training and learning about diseases, gets convinced they have at least like 6 rare diseases. And they're like, I would never have thought of this, but I'm reading this textbook and it says that if you have to blink twice, that's a rare sign of early Alzheimer's. You're like, oh my God, I just blinked twice. What if I have it? So every medical student goes through that whole thing. And as for medications, I think we just get more comfortable with all of them. So I don't think anybody goes over recommended dosing, but I'm probably more comfortable taking Motrin and Tylenol than the average. Like, I feel like most of my friends who aren't in medicine are like, oh, like I took one, I don't want to take any more for another week. No, I know how these meds work. I know the risks associated with them really well. So I feel comfortable using Motrin or Relieve for a week or however long I need it to do what I need it to do. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no. I think obviously, like, as a patient going in, you feel like this person who I'm talking to has every answer for me and stuff like that. And so like there is a little bit of a knowledge game, and maybe like a doctor can sort of see like where the edge is a little bit more clearly, and they know their body, you know, and stuff like that, where you probably like, I don't know if I'm like miscarrying, but like if you're telling like a regular person like, hey, just do this, keep it simple, you might be able to like better understand, or you have a certain comfort level with like your physiology or something, or maybe not. I don't know. Like, are you guys like, do doctors, I don't know if like what the rules are. Like, can you self-diagnose? You can't like self-prescribe yourself, right?
You can. It's frowned upon. Like, if I wanted to go get myself medication at the local pharmacy, I could.
Okay.
You can't do it for narcotics. So I couldn't go in and be like, hey, I'd love some more Percocet, please. Obviously, that would be very bad. But yeah, for most medication, you can go there. I mean, nausea medication is probably the most commonly self-prescribed. I have no data behind that. That's my guess. But the nausea medicines tend to have very low risks associated with them, and they work exceptionally well. So people who come in with nausea, we give prescriptions all the time. Taking it for yourself, Plenty of people do that.
Mm-hmm.
And as for self-diagnosis, yeah, I mean, if I don't know your body, it's really hard. I mean, we all push around, we do our exam to get our best idea of what's going on, where it hurts, how much it hurts, what was leading up to that pain, to give us the best idea. But there are a lot of times where you don't end up with a clear diagnosis. So if you came in with abdominal pain as an otherwise healthy 30-year-old, and we press around, I can say, okay, we have a couple of options. I can't tell you just based on this exam and your history exactly what's going on. So we can do a CT scan, but that means you're going to get contrast, which you can have a reaction to. There's radiation involved, which is not a ton of radiation, but it's always better to avoid radiation. Can be cancer-inducing. I mean, a CT scan is so low that I wouldn't make a big deal of it. I've had them myself. But you want to avoid it where you can, obviously. So it's really easy for me when it's my body to decide, okay, like I am uncomfortable right now. I know that if I went in, here are my options. I wouldn't want to get this or that. I don't think that I have the things that the blood tests are going to be looking for. I think this is most likely one of these 5 things. So I'm going to just stay home and keep checking myself and check my temperature and my vital signs, and I can monitor myself at home.
Right.
That's much easier than me telling you, like, hey, you have belly pain, you'll probably be fine, because you don't know the differential the same way that I do. So it's harder we do a lot of shared decision making with patients, and it's clearly frustrating for them sometimes because they just want the doctor to have the answer, and medicine's not there yet. We just don't have the answer a lot of the time.
Right. And I think that's kind of like my next question is like that sort of almost like customer service aspect, because you are treating them, however, like they are seeking your services for good reason. Is it kind of like going back to like the idea of like, is there ever a time where like a doctor will almost like eye roll when like a patient comes in and it's clearly nothing? Like obviously, like you were saying, somebody has chest pain, you should get that checked and blah, blah, blah. But like, are there any times where it's just like you really came in for this? Or is it just like, we're doctors, everybody is treated, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, is there any time where you're like, come on, buddy, like, you didn't need to come in for this? Not to like try to say like
the
doctors.
professional in me would say no. We treat everything. I mean, it's always good to try and remember for all of us, and we all lose sight of this sometimes, that everybody's showing up because they need help, and whether it's, it is really, really hard to go from someone who is truly dying to someone who's like, hey, I kicked the foot of the bed and my toe hurts. You're like, how long ago did that happen? They go, 2 weeks. Why did you show up at 2 a.m.? Like, can I go back to the room where that patient's dying? But again, trying to keep in mind that person showed up because they're scared and sometimes they just need reassurance. So keeping that in mind, makes your job better, makes your patients happier. Everything works better when you can keep that in mind, but there are times it's easier and times it's harder.
Right. So having to like switch gears, I think this is sort of like, we kind of covered like what it's like. You got to change gears and stuff. Like what is it like as a sort of regular person to be the one who is the ER doctor who has the responsibility of, being the sort of gatekeeper, between someone's life and not, and then of course on the same floor you have someone who stubbed your toe. Like emotionally, what is it like being in an ER room for X amount of hours, day in and day out?
It's been really taxing recently because more people are going out sick. People aren't, it wasn't great to work while you had a cold before, but people used to do it all the time. You don't want to call out sick, make your partners work, make somebody else have to work more days in a row, so we've been doing more of that as people fairly go out sick, or they can't come in because their whole family's sick and they may not have symptoms, but they're probably carrying, or it's so emotionally the like day in day out part can be taxing. I think at the end of the day my job is pretty wonderful. I'm still surprised that people trust someone who looks 15 to help them, but they seem to be okay with it after I've started talking and explaining what's going on. And I think it is a pretty amazing gift that you get to do this. It's certainly can be intimidating and painful when you have done everything that you can and someone still doesn't make it, and having to go from, I heard someone say once, there's no other job on the planet where you can have someone you just spent an hour with die and then have to walk next door and keep doing your job at the same level you were supposed to be doing it at an hour before that. So it can be hard. The first time you see someone pass away as a medical student, it's usually a medical student. As a medical student, it's hard, and you usually try and give them a little bit of time and space to process it. And whenever something happens to a kid that's really bad, the whole department just kind of grinds to a halt for a few minutes, and then we'll try and ramp back up as quickly as we can. But there's certainly days and times and the doctor's just at 90% instead of 100 because of what happened an hour ago or 10 minutes ago. And
that's brutal. I mean, because especially like we're saying, if the patient never knows or honestly even cares necessarily what the doctor is going through, whatever, and so that it's sort of performative in the sense that you're like, well, I got to turn it on for this next patient because they don't care what I just went through, and nor should they, they want to get better and all that. Is there any sort of emotional training that you guys go through, or some sort of, or is it just sort of a very supportive community? Because you guys have all the technical skills and you have personality traits, but it is a grind and it's very taxing. What type of support do you guys get to keep your morale high, and how do you guys make it work? Or is it just
you're pretty much thrown to the wolves.
Okay.
You gotta, residency does a good job of that, because you have, so my residency class was 9 people, including me, and you're all going through the same things at generally the same time. So our first year of residencies, you just trying to figure out what it means to really be a doctor and what it means to make a decision, because we don't have the answer. And I can say, okay, here's what I think is going on with Phil, and here's how I'm going to try and treat him best. Am I going to be right every time? No doctor is. And you're trying to figure out how to do that and deal with the mistakes you've made and the complications of those mistakes at the same time as these other 8 people. And the people above you who have made those mistakes recently you can turn to. I was really fortunate that the senior resident class when I was an intern were these super supportive people you could really turn to. I don't know if we got we certainly did not get specific training in how to, no training in how to discuss end-of-life care with people, how to talk to families after someone's passed away, how to deal with the intricacies of that, and then go into the next room and say, hey, I'm Dr. Frenkel. I hear your knee hurts. I'm really sorry to hear that. How can we fix that for you or work on that for you today? But if you are lucky enough to have a good resident class and just residency support system, it can definitely help you as you stumble and falter.
Yeah, I remember when my dad was in the hospital before he passed, I had some young doctors in there. They had I don't know what the right headmaster doctor or whatever. They had him, and he would come in periodically. Then they'd have younger doctors where my dad was in great care, but sometimes it felt like the doctors were almost, like younger doctors were like testing their like material, like in terms of like, how am I going to communicate this? And I could see them like almost probably having like rehearsed it a little bit, where one doctor was saying, he was like tried to like mention like how like this was like a TED talk he listened to, and I was just like, I get what you're saying, but like you're a little raw right now for like, this is a little, I appreciated his strategy, but I could tell like he's like developing his relationship and his expertise in like delivering news and trying to comfort people and stuff like that. So I imagine it takes a heck of a lot of trial and error and stuff like that. Do you find yourself like how do you maybe like develop those types of skills? And on top of that, are there patients who are just, I mean, they're like, do they ever get like pissed off that like you're not treating what I want, or like this isn't what I wanted, or because they just have a different understanding of what you're doing for them?
Yeah, no, patient expectations are part of all of medicine, and it's part of medicine becoming more of a business is this struggle with people who come in because they just want narcotics, they just want sedatives, they just want this thing that somebody gave them before that made them feel better, even though we now know it's not the right way to treat that. It's going to cause more complications. And everything in medicine comes with a potential cost. So trying to balance out these, thankfully I don't work at any of these jobs, but there are jobs out there where if you don't meet patient satisfaction scores, and that person who came in saying, I want X, if you try and talk them out of it and they don't appreciate the way you've done that, or they don't care because they just want that thing, they can fill out the same survey and give you poor scores, and that's your livelihood. Mm-hmm. So that part of it is interesting, and I totally forgot the rest of your question.
No, that's okay. It was like a little bit of a story file, whatever. No, I think that makes sense. I remember there is like a little bit of a bias. I am kind of interested to know, like, whenever I've had a young doctor come in, especially when they're young, I'm just like, I guess they were just like top of class or something, because I'm like, you look like you're 20 something, I'm here, my mom's here, like we expect like, real good answers for all of this. Do you like, what is your strategy in terms of like, what is like the protocol that you kind of go through when a patient comes in to like, do you try to like build trust? Is it just like, hey, I just want to know what's going on? Like, in the way you do it, like, how do you go through like that sort of connection with the patient and sort of learning like what they're going through, but also like making them feel comfortable? Because I imagine like some doctors are maybe much more like mechanical and just like boom, 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 boom. You seem like you're more like friendly, So what's your kind of strategy or persona when you talk to a patient?
It's really dependent on the patient, and part of what's interesting about and fun about my job is you have to make these connections to people really quickly, because they have to trust you not only to tell you the whole story, some of which can end up being funny and you can't laugh, and some of which can be really sad or really painful, but they have to trust you with that and trust you to try the medication you're going to give them, and saying, all right, we're going to do this, but you're not going to really feel better for a couple of hours, so trust me, we're on the right path. And building that rapport is totally different with you than an 80-year-old, is different than a 50-year-old, is different than a 2-year-old. So it's, everybody I think works on developing their own system, and you're right, a lot of people I think just go for the mechanical, like, I'm your doctor, this is what we do, here's how, and like, that's, I think, more how doctors used to be, and it is one way of doing it. I don't think they're necessarily wrong. I think if you are trying to guess at what people want, which is how they want to be interacted with, what their there's only so much that you can really ask people outright. When you're wrong, it can really hurt that trust and mean that you don't get all the information, or that they don't want to try the antibiotic they need to take for a week to really start getting better. They'll try it for 2 days and see that it's not great and go somewhere else, and now they've taken multiple antibiotics, and there ends up being cost to these things. So it's my way of doing it is definitely all right, like, here's Phil, here's what I know about him so far. I looked through the chart a little bit, and I've seen how other people have, to a certain degree, described how they interacted with him. And I think as you see more and more people, you can figure out systems that tend to work for general parts of the population, and kind of go from there.
Mm-hmm. Are there any times, probably just got a couple questions left, so sort of changing a little bit, but are there any times when, like, you feel like the patient is just, like, BSing you? And, like, whether it's, obviously I think, like, the most common reason is either for, like, prescription drugs or stuff like that, but are there any times where you're just, like, you're like, how did that get in there? Or, like, it's like, oh, what happened here? Like, I don't know if that matters to their, like, prognosis or diagnosis or whatever, but what happens when you feel like a patient's lying to you?
Well, you have to, I mean, that's part of medicine, sadly. I think there was an episode of Black Mirror where they had these halos where you just, like, put one on you and put one on me, and I can feel everything you're feeling. So, like, oh, like, I have this horrible headache, and you put it on, and I put it on. I'm like, he doesn't have a headache. But without that system, you do just kind of have to say, okay, this patient's saying these things, but their general picture doesn't match. They're saying that they have this horrible X, Y, and Z, and the only thing that's ever worked for it is this super strong narcotic, and they want that. They're like, there's this routine of medications people will ask for. Like, if they ask for these 3 in a row to be pushed like this, it's a little flicker should go off somewhere. And sometimes that is the only thing that works for people, and sometimes that's people looking to get a high. So it's really a judgment call on how you handle those things, and whether you just take everyone at their word, which can be good or could be dangerous, and whether you take no one at their word, which would be, I would assume, very dangerous. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing from the show House was like everybody lies. I think if you went into medicine like that, you wouldn't enjoy your job, and you would really provide poor healthcare. But if you never take a second to think through the explanation they're giving you and the symptoms and saying, okay, there is something that doesn't fit here. Maybe we're not understanding things the same way. They're trying to describe X but saying Y. Another one of those, it's got a fine balance.
Are there any, like, best practices for what a patient should do when they go to an ER doctor or whatever, where it's like, okay, I need to get my story straight, I need to explain where it hurts, how it happened, how long it's been, like, what are, like, the rules to just being, like, a good patient to help make your job easier?
I love this question. So if you really have your story down, like, in a linear fashion, that is super helpful for us. A lot of people, and it's hard. I mean, like, well, on Tuesday I did this, wait, no, on Sunday I did that, but then Thursday, and I don't know, I was nauseous like 2 months ago, but not now. We're dealing with now, like, I need to know whether you're currently nauseous. And they go, well, maybe, I know I was 2 months ago. If you can work it through, like, I started having abdominal pain on Sunday. It got worse when I did this. It got better when I did that. I've tried these 4 things. None of it helped. I had a glass of water, and even that was causing this same burning sensation that's right here, and it goes to my back. And I've never had anything like this. And here are the current medications I take, and I use my family history, I smoke, and I drink twice. Like, you can just, if you really wanted to, you could get it down like that, so we don't have to ask any questions. But realistically, it's part of our job to be able to parse that out, and just kind of part of the training is like, okay, like, he was saying it in this order, but really it's this. it's why patients will read the notes that we write now and say, oh, hey, by the way, you got this wrong or that wrong. And I mean, it's us interpreting as best we can. We have those however many other patients that we're trying to keep track of as well, and you're important, but you're one of those however many. And okay, if we're getting the majority of the facts correct and able to order the test that we need, that's our main goal. Mm-hmm. So whether the pain started 4 days ago or 5 days ago is less important. Just the who, what, when, where, why, and how, like just in a linear fashion, and having your medications, like what medications you take, be huge.
No, when my dad wasn't feeling well, like, and so he wasn't able to like always answer accurately which ones he was taking or whatever. I was just like, I don't know what we're doing for this doctor here. Like, they can't, like, there's like 10 of them, and it was like, I can't imagine that being like an easy process, because you could make a judgment based off of incorrect information or incomplete information. So yeah, that's nuts. Last question. What, for better or for worse, or however, whatever, what is maybe like the weirdest or most fascinating thing that you've seen in an ER doctor? And whether it was just like medically amazing, like funny, weird, what happened there, like what's something that just sort of like blew you away in the ER room?
How
you can get I think you can get as weird as you need to get.
Okay. I think I've told you some of the other ones. Do you want one of those, or do you want?
No. I would say do whichever one you feel like changed you. Like, be like, I didn't know people could do that, or like that could happen.
I'll give you two pretty amazing ones. There was a guy who was on a lot of different, drugs, including meth. So they're delirious. They're crazy and raging around. So you have to chemically and physically restrain them. So this guy was called 4-point restraint. So his arms are tied, his legs are tied. He was somehow naked in this bed because he kicked around enough that his gown had gone up, and he started peeing and was peeing into his mouth. You get this frantic page overhead, like, everyone to room 27. You run over there, you're like, that's not what I thought we were going to be dealing with, but there it is.
Was he trying to pee into his mouth, or was he just...
No, he was. This was very intentional.
With his arms and legs contained, so he was like...
It was pretty impressive. Okay. I'm still not sure how he did it. I haven't tried it on my own, but,
I think that'll be the clip from the episode. So this guy was peeing into his mouth on his bed. Okay.
And the other one would be probably 50-year-old guy and his wife come in... And to shorten the story a little bit, essentially his wife had taken a pool noodle, and duct taped the end of it to make it a little bit more narrow, and aimed to give him some rectally enhanced pleasure. Problem is, when you use duct tape like that, and it's not just going on super smoothly, all those edges are really sharp. So they couldn't get it out. So they cut off part of the end. He put on some, what are those called? Parachute pants. Mm-hmm. And came in. He ended up having to go to the operating room because you can't get it out. You can't pull on it. You're going to tear him. But yeah, that CT is an image that will be burned into my eyes for a long time to come.
Damn. Yeah, do you just what do you think when obviously you have you treat them, and obviously, but is it ever the patient, what does the patient say, or are the patients just like the pool noodle guy, is he just freaked out, or is he does he have a sense of humor about the situation, or
some people are really great about it. Some people are like, hey, I know this is crazy, but we wanted to spice things up. And you go, you know what? I respect that. You and your wife been together for 30 years. You wanted to try something new. I wouldn't have gone pool noodle, but
Right.
We went there, and I respect you for it. So there's that end, and there's the end. I told you the story about the double cock rings we had to cut off.
Yeah, I actually think you should say it. But I think people need to hear this because I do have a follow-up question, and then we'll probably wrap up on that note.
Perfect.
But I do want to know. People need to hear this. If you do have a cock ring, you got to pay attention to this. And yeah, tell us the cock ring story.
All right. I did not know how cock rings were used before this, but they go around the whole shebang. So the penis and the testicles, everything goes through, and then you get the erection, and it holds all the blood in there. So this guy had put on two of them. One was stainless steel and one was copper. The stainless steel one was probably an inch thick. The copper is probably a half an inch. I don't know why you put two on. He does a bunch of meth, which is a really common drug in San Diego. Has, I guess, this sex marathon, and then falls asleep meth makes you really high, and it's like cocaine on cocaine on cocaine. So it's like you're super amped for a long period of time, and then you crash for a long period of time. You sleep for 20 hours. So this guy wakes up having had this erection for 30 hours. Can't get the cock rings off. Everything is not looking great. So he comes in. He won't tell any of the triage nurses or anybody what the problem is. So he gets put into this room. I go in, and he just shows me the problem, which was a real problem. And we didn't have anything thick enough to cut through it in the department. So we call the orthopedics department. They don't have anything that'll cut through it. We called the fire department, who didn't have anything that they could use. We could cut it, but it's just a hand saw that would also cut off everything else down there. So we end up having to call maintenance in the hospital, who gives they bring up this enormous air compressor the size of a bed and this Dremel. So we're essentially spraying water and have this piece of metal we've slid between his penis and the cock rings, and just kind of cutting down until it heats up too much, even with the water, or taking a second, and so you have to cut two cock rings in two places to break a ring. So this guy is obviously freaking out, and we need a bunch of people in there to spray the water and to do all this. So the room is way more full than I'm sure it'd like. And the maintenance guy's in there making sure that the air compressor stays functioning, because if that stops halfway through, then we're right back where we started. And I don't blame the guy. The room was full of people, and as soon as we get the second place broken, and it opens up, he's in a gown that's up to here, wearing nothing else, and just literally looks around, realizes he's free, and just runs out of the hospital. Never saw him again.
Okay. I feel like that's, maybe I get it.
I would be worried enough about my stuff to want to stay around and get he needed some wound care. But no, he must have found a way to handle it himself.
Yeah.
And he just ran out butt naked.
That did he have a insurance or he just, or is that just dine and dashed, or did he was just all right, I'm done? Anybody should do that, maybe, they don't need to check out, the procedure's done, charge me, on my insurance.
Oh, that does happen. And it is interesting. So there's this kind of separate topic I won't delve into too much. Leaving against medical advice is this medical legal aspect of medicine that's frustrating, because people, if we order tests on you in the emergency department, we want them all back to make sure that everything looks okay. And if you have most of the tests back and everything's looking okay, and you just want to leave, you'd have to sign this paper that says, I understand that I'm leaving before all the stuff is done. But your insurance, as far as I know, will still cover your bill. And you're allowed to do that. You're an adult. You have decision-making capacity. There's a couple of things you need to be able to, like, check off. Like, this person can make this decision. They understand the consequences of making a decision like this. Yeah, of course you can go. You're an adult. So can you do that? Totally. In his case, would I? No.
Yeah, he needed to stay there.
Yeah, he should have stayed. I mean, it's important.
We don't know if it still... Do you think it still works? He's not back, so maybe...
I'm not the guy you would come to if it wasn't working, though, so...
Yeah. Well, we're looking out for him. We hope he's okay. Yeah. I think he might be... It's just a valuable lesson to learn, okay? Whether it's 4 hours or 30 hours, get it checked out. And I think that's my medical advice. I'll just say that. But anyway, on that note, Sam, thanks for coming through. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks.